Hello, my name is Benji and welcome to Dice vs Cards. Today we go back to the 41st millennium to help you build your first Death Guard force. Now whether you built an army before or this is your first time at all this, we've got you covered. First things first though, one assumes you're watching this video because you've more or less made your mind up about Death Guard, and so we won't be going into any detail about their background and fluff. But let's just give you a quick primer about what they bring to the table. Well, they're what happened when you take a conventional Space Marine army, make them slightly more ponderous but a great deal more resilient, and paint them with the fugly stick. Of course, they have more than just the heretic Astartes at their disposal. Any number of grim and gruesome units and vehicles have been concocted in the image of the Chaos God Nurgle to round out your selection. Mechanically speaking, this slow, steady and tough army prefer to conduct themselves more at short to medium range and bring with them auras that both support their own units and harm the enemy. That's Death Guard in a nutshell. As with our previous army building videos, we're going to split these up so that they each focus on the 4 different ranges of force size found in the core rulebook. Remember, you most often use power to build an army when playing in open and narrative play, as this gives a more surface level approach to a unit's cost. Or points, which is most often used in match play, and adds a level of granularity to costing a unit. And so today we'll be walking you through a combat patrol army, clocking in at 25 power or 500 points. And then future episodes will feature incursion, strike force and ultimately onslaught armies up to a whopping 150 power or 3000 points. It should also be noted that this series will not act as an exhaustive list of each and every option you have to get from 0 to 3000. You'll need to pick your own codex up for that. But instead it's meant to act as more of a roadmap for how you might want to start and grow your army. But because variety, as they say, is the spice of life, we're actually going to be building 2 armies just to show you differing ways to how you can approach all this available choice. So for our first build, we're embracing the pox by crafting a pseudo swarm army that incorporates a great number of poxwalkers. And think zombies in the 41st millennium, who do their very best to not stay down. Oh, and they come back to life when you kill stuff. This will be the best blob army impression Death Guard can muster. But we'll also be going down the road of an elite version of the Guard. We won't be purposely trying to field the least amount of models on the table, but more or less everything we do choose will wield a great deal of potency. So as advertised, let's start with the Poxwalker build. And we get a bit of good fortune here because the only start collecting box currently available for Death Guard is the Combat Patrol one that they're releasing a version of with each new codex. But this has exactly what we need to get this party started. And so kicking off with the platform for a patrol detachment is the HQ Typhus. Now I don't usually espouse taking named characters in small point games, but Typhus and Poxwalkers have a bit of a synergy thing going, where he gives them extra strength. If you couple that with the relatively small disparity in points between all your HQ choices, it's not too much to cram Typhus in here. The DG Codex is somewhat restrictive on taking HQs as well, because apparently they're the jealous type and don't like to share power. Basically, if you take any of all but 2 of the HQ choices, you can't take any other HQs. Now those 2 I mentioned in passing for whatever reason sit outside of that restriction, but we'll cover those in a future video. Back on point now, not only is Typhus a beast in melee, he's a psyker too, giving him something to do on the way up to smash him face. Rest assured, you won't be bored fielding this mini. The whole rest of the build is troop choices, believe it or not, and fitting them into a patrol detachment is going to be a tricky proposition. 2 units of 5 Plague Marines then are the order of the day. But yes, you've only got 7 in the combat patrol box, but I'm hoping you're industrious enough to get hold of an easy to build box that will get you up to the magic number. That, or you're stuck with multipliers of 7. Because you know, Nurgle's sacred number is 7. Yeah. What they bring is short to medium range goodness, and though they only have 2 wounds, they take 1 less damage to a minimum of 1 each pop. In other words, they ain't easy to get rid of. But as this is a pox build, it's time for the stars of the show to take centre stage. Unfortunately, was restricted to only 1 of these units for every Plague Marine, Terminator or Possessed unit we bring. So in some ways these lists are going to be writing themselves. But you came here for the pretty pictures as well, right? This is also where we get screwed by the sometimes wonky comparison between power and points totals. Now if you're playing with power, then sadly you'll need to take 2 units of 10 to get the number 25 power. However, this has the unfortunate byproduct of exceeding the maximum number of troop choices for a patrol detachment. So you're going to have to suck it up and pay the 2 command points for an auxiliary detachment as well. If you're playing points though, that concession isn't necessary, as you can cram 1 unit of 20 Poxwalkers in instead and still be comfortably within the limit. And that, as they say, ladies and gentlemen, is that. A nailed on 25 power and a less nailed on 475 points. So feel free to spend those 25 points however you see fit. You can even fit an extra marine in one of the units if you got the plastic to hand. Now that doesn't make full use of the combat patrol box by any means, it's still the much cheaper medium to long term option, leaving you with 10 extra Poxwalkers and 1 Biologist Putrefier for future use. And so to the elite Death Guard list. We're going to start the show with a new model, the Lord of Virulence, as our HQ choice. He's a little bit cheaper than Typhus, but still brings some core unit synergy to the table. Now whilst he's got a short range weapon, the beauty of this guy is that you can also deep strike him into combat if you so desire. We then move to a solitary unit of 5 Plague Marines to kick off our troop choices. Now we've already talked about these, they bring everything you'd hope for and more from a Space Marine unit. And so these are about as super duper as you can get your rank and file. This time though, we'll be complementing them with a unit of 10 cultists. Now strictly speaking, cultists are inferior to Poxwalkers. Not for nothing as much because they don't have the objective secured special rule that aids you in capping objectives. But the one upside they have is that they have ranged weaponry, and in small point games that's no bad thing. You can of course readily replace these with Poxwalkers, but you will of course be going rogue on me. Next up is an elite choice in the form of the Biologist Putrefier that can be found in that combat patrol box, but you can also buy it separately. But what a great name! Now before we figure out what this fella does, we should note that he has the fetid Virion keyword. What that means is you can take up to 3 of these single model units together, and they all count as just the one elite choice, even though they remain separate units on the battlefield. Basically the idea then is you protect this model with your unit of Marines by virtue of him being a character, and in return he makes their grenades supercharged and gives them some dishing out mortal wounds shenanigans. And then this guy's pistol is nasty, so expect some wonderful little tricks in close combat. And finally we've made room for a fast attack Myphitic Blight Hauler. Yes, Death Guard do get all the cool names it seems. And this little piggy is mobile, has a lot of wounds and a healthy arsenal to point at your opponent. There's a really healthy amount of damage you can spread with a long range missile launcher, a medium range multi-melter and a short range blast weapon that they've imaginarily titled a bile spurt. I love the scalability of missile launchers, especially if they have two profiles to deal with: high toughness and multiple wound units, and lower toughness single wound models. Just a great all-round selection to finish off the list. That brings you neatly to 25 power again and 480 points without upgrades. Unfortunately just shy of being able to cram in that extra marine, but 20 points is out to be sniffed at. And so although the total cost of these is cheaper than the other list, you've got nothing left on the sprue in reserve. So expect for the roles to reverse as we continue to grow these lists. Alternatively, you can still pick up the combat patrol box if you think you might make use of the poxwalkers at some point. Now it's clear from both lists that there hasn't been much wiggle room of choice. I think in part because there's no such thing as a cheap Death Guard HQ. But the important part is that we've got the core of each build started. And that's it for the first part of this series, however. I hope this gave you the information you need to get started with your new Death Guard army. Stay tuned for the next parts that will see us planning and building incursion, strike force and ultimately onslaught sized forces. However, that's it from me. I'll see you next time.